Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us. It is day 4 of the election campaign, and we're going to look at one of the big issues for voters here in BC, healthcare. What needs to change, and what party's promises matter the most to you? And in our second half, the early bird may get the worm, but which songbird in BC has the sweetest song? We'll take a look at a heated competition to name BC's best songbird. I'm Amy Bell, in for Michelle Elliott, and this is BC Today. And happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us on radio, TV, and live stream. You can call us now on our top story. What are your top healthcare issues, and how would you like to see the next government tackle healthcare? Our number is 604-669-3733. You can also reach us at 1-800-825-5950, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. We're finding out what issues matter most here in BC leading up to the election. First, we're going to head over to the southeast corner of the province, which has historically voted Conservative. Our Corey Bullock went and took the temperature of its riding, and she found out that not only is faith in politics a little bit shaken, but healthcare is among the issues that are top of mind.
Instead of these leaders pointing it to each other and acting like kindergarten kids.
With the federal election just around the corner, there's a sense of uncertainty on the streets of Cranbrook.
I wish they would say, we're going to do this and this and this to improve Canada.
Despite their unease, these voters still plan to cast ballots, this time in the newly named riding of Columbia-Kootenay Southern Rockies. It's a massive area that includes Nelson, Creston, Cranbrook, and Invermere. The region has historically voted in Conservative MPs, and this former MLA doesn't think that will change.
We are mainly Conservative in this area. We did elect an NDP MP once when the boundaries of the riding were changed and took in some parts of the West Kootenay.
Bennett notes that in the East Kootenay, people have tended to vote NDP provincially and Conservative federally.
There are people that work really hard, love their families, want to get ahead economically, want to make sure they continue to have their jobs working in the mining industry and the forest industry.
So what do voters here want this election?
I would like more support for the seniors, because I am a senior, and I think they should think more of the health care.
More money needs to be put into health in general, all across the board: dental health, mental health, natural health.
Bennett agrees healthcare is top of mind, even if it's a provincial responsibility.
The best thing for the feds to do, honestly, is to just, whatever money they have for healthcare, divide it up and give it to the provinces per cap and let the provinces do the job.
His other piece of advice?
I strongly urge people to vote.
Canadians will do so on April 28th. Corey Bullock, CBC News, Cranbrook.
So what are your top healthcare issues for this election? How would you like to see the next federal government tackle healthcare? And what healthcare priorities would you like to see from that next government? Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell phone, or email us bctoday@cbc.ca. Joining us now is Dr. Alex Nataros. He is a family physician and the medical director of the North Island Community Health Center in Port Hardy. Hello, doctor. How are you?
Hi, Amy. Thanks to you and your listeners for having me today.
Yeah, very happy to have you here. So where do you think healthcare sits as an issue in this upcoming election?
I think one thing we all have to realize is that health and healthcare is political. It's not partisan, but it's a political issue, how we care for ourselves and how we care for our communities. And so it's a central issue in our election today. And even though healthcare is a provincial responsibility, there's billions of dollars that flow, as we just heard, from the federal government to the provinces.
And why isn't healthcare maybe getting as high a priority in this election as some other major issues?
Well, you know, I think as Canadians, we're worried, right? There's unfair threats to our economy with tariffs, with the uncertainty of the political leadership in the US, and our way of life is threatened, maybe even a recession coming up, how to find an affordable home. So these are all key issues, but without health, nothing matters. And I think a lot of our listeners, a lot of your listeners will recognize that. We're looking at our families, looking at ourselves. You know, we're all going to face chronic illness in our lifetimes.
And as you know, as we've said, as Bill Bennett mentioned in that story we just heard, you know, delivering healthcare is provincial jurisdiction, but there has to be some responsibility for the federal government when it comes to healthcare. What would you like to see the governments doing to address this right across the country?
Totally. You know, I think there's real solutions that can be offered, and we have to look across the world at best practices. I think often we get a little bit, you know, disadvantaged by comparing to our neighbor to the south in the States. And, you know, one of the advantages now, looking to Europe, looking around the world for trading connections, is we should also learn from other healthcare examples. And one example, and I was discussing with my MLA, who's the opposition health critic, yesterday about this, was that, you know, we should have guaranteed wait times. So, for example, in Europe, right, countries like Denmark and Portugal and Finland and Sweden, if patients don't get a hip replaced or knee replaced or their cataracts fixed in a certain amount of time, they can pick up and go to an adjacent country and get that done and be reimbursed for their care. Why aren't federal politicians talking about that? And, you know, I'm trying in Port Hardy to engage my, you know, candidates for MP with this. And I've actively been in touch in my role as a family doctor.
We do have a couple of calls that have come in. We'll go to Mac in Ladysmith. Hi, Mac. What are your thoughts on healthcare?
Well, I think healthcare is the biggest issue in the election.
Okay.
I think it's the most important issue for all age classes. Well, I'm a senior. I know that I need healthcare for my grandkids and my kids, and everybody else does. The lack of family doctors. That whole area has to be done with. The shortage of specialists. I waited about a year to see a specialist. We need that money going into healthcare. I'm particularly concerned about Polyev. If what I heard was true, that he's getting funding from the U.S. healthcare companies, I can't afford it. I haven't got enough money left, neither do my kids, neither do my grandkids, to be able to do it.
Right.
We have the most wonderful system of public health care and universal health care. We can't afford to let it go.
Okay.
So I hope each of the politicians comes forward and makes a statement.
All right.
I don't really care about tax cuts. We need to know that we're getting doctors and we're getting health care, because if we do, then we're fit and able to support Canada against the threats from our neighbor to the south there. And as a veteran, I'm not about to let Canada be overwhelmed by either economic or military threats from a guy like Trump.
I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us, Mac, and I can hear the frustration in your voice. And I'm not able to fact check the claim of Polyev receiving any funding from any medical companies, but Dr. Nataros, we hear this very often in callers to this show, in emails to the newsroom. There's this sense of frustration without having enough doctors, that it is impacting all ages, and yet still people just don't feel they're getting the support, especially in those more less populated areas, I suppose. The further you go from the main city centers, the harder it is to get care. Why do we still see such a disconnect when it comes to having those proper resources right across the province, no matter which area you're living in?
Totally. I mean, and you know, I can speak to my community where I live in Port Hardy, and we've had an Emerge closed for the past 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, our MLA, Dr. Anna Kindy, had served as a family doctor in Port Hardy in the 1990s when there was an open and functioning Emerge. So we've slid backwards. We need to do better. And we heard in your clip at the opening Cranbrook, right? Cranbrook has struggled tremendously. And so this is something that I've been quite outspoken and advocated for, is the use of physician assistants, for example. And I've worked with the mayor in Cranbrook on this, as well as Port Hardy and across the province. But I think to your caller's frustration and to your question, we need our politicians to take responsibility. As doctors every day, I have to take responsibility for the health of the patient I'm seeing and their medications and everything else. Somehow we let politicians slide. We let politicians stand up, and I'm not a partisan. I don't know who I'm going to be voting for in this election, but I do want to see politicians start to take responsibility. And it's not a matter of federal or provincial. It's a matter of standing up and saying what you're going to do to champion family doctors, to champion universal health care.
We've got another call that's come in from Dale in Mill Bay. Hi, Dale. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. Yourself?
I'm doing great. And what are your thoughts when it comes to healthcare in terms of the election? What would you like to see?
Well, I've heard what Mr. Poilievre has said on many occasions. He wants to see more doctors being fast-tracked into, like foreign doctors, being fast-tracked into the system. Right now, they have to almost go back and re-study, which is ridiculous. Like, personal experience, I'm also a senior. My wife and I have had a situation just recently. It was actually the 19th of October, which was BC election day. We spent 14 hours in the emergency at the General Hospital in Victoria.
Wow.
14 hours. And the thing that I noticed most was there were a lot of people there for simple little things like a baby with sniffles and things like that. But the emergency was jammed because there are no walk-in clinics anymore. In Duncan, I think there's one. In the Mill Bay area, there is one. And right now, the Life Labs has been bought by an American company. So Life Labs is no longer a Canadian-owned company, and they're right now work to rule because they're on strike for wages. Like, the healthcare system in this country used to be the envy of the world. And now it is a shambles. It's ridiculous. I'm 71. My wife is 7. But you can't take your child to get their ears checked without having to wait for 6 weeks to get an appointment with an ear, throat, nose, and throat person or something like that.
No, absolutely.
It's absolutely out of control. And our money is going south of the border for all kinds of reasons, which don't make sense to me. Anyway, that's my rant.
Well, no, I not a rant. You're sharing your experience, and again, we hear that frustration coming through. So I thank you for that, Dale. And Doctor, as he's alluding to, we hear time and time again about these incredibly long waits in an ER to be seen for even something as simple as a X-ray, and many people that are not able to access a family doctor or not able to get in to see a specialist do show up at these ERs, sort of further complicating matters. So, we're obviously getting something wrong when we're seeing a lack of family doctors, ERs having to close. What steps do we need to take to make sure that whatever level of care, be it in an emergency, be it a specialist, you are able to access it in a timely manner?
Great question, Amy. And, I think there were a couple points raised by that caller I'd like to address.
Yeah, please.
One is in terms of the foreign trained medical doctors. Credit where credit is due. Our provincial government under Premier Eby has tripled the size of the Practice Ready Assessment BC program. It's a program I'm involved with as an assessor in Port Hardy. And I've actually got a new medical doctor from Syria who I'm going to be assessing.
Okay.
And hopefully will be joining our community if he's successful. And so that's an example. It's tripled in size from, just over 30 to over 90 candidates. That's in the past year. So that's making progress. We've got a relatively new, past 2 years, longitudinal family physician payment program that's brought over 1,000 doctors into the BC program. But we got to do more. I mean, we each know that, having a family doctor is such a rare thing. Having access to a family doctor, even if you have one, is a challenge. And as your caller said, just having a look in a child's ear if it's infected, you can't wait 6 weeks for that. You need to see your family doctor today.
Yeah.
And so, here in Port Hardy at the North Island Community Health Center, we have a walk-in clinic daily, and we meet the needs of our population. I think it's really important that we ask hard questions about what's happened to the walk-in clinics, because they're not ideal in terms of the best overall care we know. And the evidence is longitudinal family physicians providing care. But we also need to have access to walk-in care for episodic care. We can't have everyone showing up at Emerge just to have a look in the ear of a child with a sore ear. Right? So these are all components. As I've alluded to, we need physician assistants in our healthcare system. These are physician extenders. I've got 2 hands. I can double my set of hands if I could hire a physician assistant in Port Hardy.
We've got another call coming in from Julie in Roberts Creek. Hi, Julie. How are you?
Hi, I'm well, thank you.
Great. And what are you thinking about today with the healthcare system?
3 things. First of all, so I want to say I'm speaking from the perspective of being an elderly person.
Okay.
You could call me old.
No, I won't.
The first one is that I have many, many times participated in, enjoyed the attention and the care of our medical system. So there are huge excellencies in that and in the people who work for it. I admire them tremendously. Secondly, rural areas. That is very, very difficult. And I really think, as much as possible, that needs to be addressed because people need access. And the third thing is, I would love our government to take on a campaign which promotes health. And we have had those kinds of campaigns in the past in various governments in terms of, exercise, food. And I don't mean trying to make the population into something they're not.
No.
But just some little steps that we could all do or all address in order to make ourselves healthier. Because that's the other part that I see as my obligation. I love the health system, and I also have a responsibility to try to look after myself. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. I very much appreciate that. And Dr. Nataros, it is worth hearing, obviously worth hearing somebody like Julie, but also worth pointing out that there are so many wonderful, wonderful people involved in the healthcare system. And it does provide a tremendous amount of help, but there currently are so many holes that we are seeing people falling into, and that's what we're of course hoping to address. But no disrespect to the people that are doing their very best and working an uphill battle at times to provide excellent care.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think that's really important, and I appreciate the caller recognizing that. So I think as Canadians, when we get in that door, when we get access to care, typically the result is quite good. It's getting the foot in the door. And so, I think there's a few things your caller just mentioned. For one, as we know, of course, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so we need to all do better. Looking after ourselves, but often it's just bad luck, right? And so yes, we can work together. And Tommy Douglas, who'd helped found Medicare in Canada, had said the missing pillar was preventative care, and we still aren't there yet. And so we need to all work together and work as teams led by family doctors to provide preventative health care. In Port Hardy, since I moved here, every year I've put on a walk for your doctor, or walk with your doctor, and that's put on by Doctors of BC, sponsored, and promoting health and wellness among our patients.
I'm just going to read out an email that we received from Kathy. She writes, the need for more reasonably priced in-home care and better care for seniors in care homes and reduced waiting lists for surgeries. Yes, obviously, it's striking a nerve here today with a lot of the calls for increased care and funding for seniors. Bob writes, I work full-time and have health insurance at work. I am a diabetic with high blood pressure and high cholesterol, and I am unsure if I will be able to afford my medication after I retire. And Dr. Nataros, that's a daunting position for somebody to be in, recognizing that they may not be able to afford their health care or their medication when they retire. What can we do to protect people from that?
Well, it's part of the promise of Canada is that you pay your taxes and you work hard through your life and you'll be cared for by our social safety net and our healthcare system. And we're not meeting that promise. So, that's part of why this is a federal health issue and a key issue in our election. And I'd like to hear the politicians sharing their perspectives on it.
Yeah.
So what can we do more? I hear the email writer in that our access to long-term care is so limited. And what's happened is our emergency rooms are jammed up with patients that should be in a more appropriate, more compassionate long-term care space. In Port Hardy, as I've mentioned, we don't have a functioning emerge nor a functioning hospital because our hospital is full of long-term care patients that would be much better served and more compassionately served in long-term care. So, yes, investments in home care, investments in long-term care, and really shifting towards a compassion, a care-based society where we're recognizing the hard work of caregivers, right? And family members and otherwise, right? It takes, many hands to make light work. And we need a community-based approach. And that's part of what we're trying to do in Port Hardy with our community health center.
It sounds like a very grassroots approach as well. Dr. Nataros, we do just have to hit pause. I want to read some emails that we received yesterday. We had such an overwhelming response, so I do want to get to those before we head down to the news, but we'll get back with the healthcare problems and solutions in just a moment. It is 12:27, though, and you are with BC Today. So on yesterday's show, we asked how concerned you were with the threat of foreign interference in the upcoming election. And here are some of your thoughts. Candace said, in addition to foreign interference, I am concerned with potential domestic interference. My first recollection of Pierre Poilievre was his role in defending the Conservatives on the robocall scandal. I would be curious to know what measures Elections Canada has taken to avoid such domestic attacks on our democratic election process. David wrote, America under Trump has perhaps the strongest motives to interfere with Canada's current federal election. In fact, America's commander-in-chief interfered just on Sunday, March 23rd, when he stated he favored Liberals to win because he feels they would offer less resistance to his annexation plans. Andrea said, you touched on government interference with Trump, but the real risk from the USA is the powers behind Trump. Through Mark Zuckerberg and Elon and the owners of Google, they can change the algorithms and the influence with what we see and do not see. They can and will, and this is very dangerous. And Scott said, of course, I'm worried about Russia, China, and India, but given the recent hostility and threats emanating from south of the border, I'm more concerned about American interference in concert with hackers from their allies, North Korea and Russia. Thank you, as always, to everybody that took the time to share your thoughts. We welcome them always. You can always email us at bctoday@cbc.ca. And this is BC Today. We're on Radio 1, CBC Television, and live streaming on our website, cbc.ca/BC, YouTube at CBC Vancouver, and on the CBC News app. We've been discussing healthcare issues ahead of the election with Dr. Alex Nataros, and we will continue our discussion. But first, we'll pause to take a look at the CBC News with Robert Zimmerman.
Good afternoon. ICBC has started issuing $110 rebate checks to eligible customers. Personal and commercial customers with an active basic policy in January can expect the payment. This marks the fifth rebate handed out by ICBC in the last 4 years. The Office of BC Seniors Advocate says more than half of seniors surveyed last year report being affected by ageism, and 84% of the 9,200 respondents feel ageism is an issue in the province. A report summarizing the findings recommends the province take steps to address the matter. And the New Westminster Police Department says it's closed a section of 6th Street due to a gas line rupture. Crews are working between 5th and 6th Avenues. That section of road will be closed for several hours. Police are asking people to avoid the area. And now the forecast on the north coast, mainly cloudy this afternoon with strong winds and a high of 13. Highs around 3 and mainly cloudy in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, showers with a high of 8. Highs to 14 with a mix of sun and cloud in the West Kootenay, mainly cloudy in the East Kootenay. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, a chance of showers with a high of 14 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria, and the Fraser Valley, a chance of showers and thunderstorms this afternoon with highs around 18. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you very much, Robert. And we've been talking about healthcare issues ahead of the election with Dr. Alex Nataros, and we've got a lot of calls, so we'll hop right back into them. Jessica in Victoria, what are your thoughts on today's topic?
Well, I'm very concerned about what would happen if the Conservatives got elected and went ahead and privatized healthcare.
Okay.
What would happen would be that the profits would be moved offshore to tax havens, and that would be billions of dollars. And we just don't have that kind of economic volume to absorb that loss.
Right.
So that's my main concern, is that it would be economically the stupidest thing we've ever done. And then I also think economically we need to pay more taxes. I'm very well off, and I'm quite happy to pay more taxes.
Okay. Well,
for healthcare and education, because internationally they are the greatest stabilizers of societies and economies. And we need to do everything we can to stabilize Canada right now because of our neighbors to the south.
All right. Jessica, thanks so much for sharing. Not often that we hear people saying they're more than happy to pay extra taxes. But Doctor, how do you feel when she voices concerns about, privatizing healthcare? Is that really a strong possibility here in BC?
Yeah, I think we have to have a clear-eyed discussion about how we deliver healthcare, right? So I'm a third-generation family doctor. My grandfather and my dad ran family doctors' offices in Langley, and I've worked in 4 different provinces and rural, remote, and urban across Canada. And throughout my career, as well as my grandfather and dad's, they ran private medical practices that billed the government, and so it's privately delivered, publicly funded healthcare.
Okay.
And so I think in terms of the boogeyman of private healthcare, we got to be careful with that.
Okay.
I don't think anyone wants U.S.-style healthcare, or at least those that are paying attention to the data don't want U.S.-style healthcare. But there's lots of options.
Sure, and I think for somebody such as Jessica and many people, when they do talk about that privatization of healthcare, it is that U.S. model that they're referring to, where costs of treatment can bankrupt a family. We'll get another call in now from Scott in New Westminster. Hi, Scott.
Hi there. I'm just looking at this from a macro level, and I just. To me, the biggest issue is the downtown east side and the fact that those aren't all British Columbians there, and I think that we should be getting federal funding to deal with that, with the whole situation. And I've called in before to talk about Riverview and just the fact that we should be reinvesting and repurposing a lot of those buildings. And mental health is health, and that's something that often gets overlooked and ignored in this society. And that's something that I would really like to see happen. I mean, at one time, that population at Riverview was, I think, somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000. So there's a lot of people that could be helped. I mean, it would take a lot of funds, obviously, but those buildings have been sitting, the vast majority of those buildings have been vacant for decades, right? So that's something that I would like to see. And yeah.
All right.
That's my topic.
Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that. And Dr. Nataros, mental health is something that we do need to put a lot of focus on, because by addressing mental health, we then maybe will save people having to be treated for addiction or being treated for further mental health crises down the line. Do we need to maybe shift priorities a bit?
I couldn't agree more. There's no health without mental health, right? We can all recognize, among ourselves, our families, our loved ones, what happens if you're struggling with burnout or mental health. I think we need new approaches to delivering care. And, it comes back to community care, grassroots approaches. One of the things at the North Island Community Health Centre in Port Hardy that we do is group medical visits. And so we have patients that struggle with schizophrenia, with depression, with bipolar affective disorder or personality disorders. And we have them come together in groups and learn from one another, facilitated by doctors, by our counselor, sometimes by our dietitian. This is all part of learning and breaking stigma. So you don't necessarily need one-on-one doctor to patient. You can work together and learn from one another, because no one knows better than a patient who's struggling with an issue.
A very interesting approach, but I agree. We do need to be looking outside the box and trying to be a bit less strict in how we approach treatment, perhaps. We do have a call now from Sean in Kamloops. Hi, Sean.
Hi there.
Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah. So regarding the issues with family physicians and the lack of opportunities there. My daughter is actually a medical student in New York, and so she's considered an IMG, an international medical graduate. So I would like the provinces, not only the province of BC, but provinces across the country, to look at trying to fast-track Canadians who are considered IMGs back to their communities. If we can do that, then we have the opportunity of bringing these Canadians who come from our communities to practice here for decades. And right now, there are limited seats of IMGs and the matching process. So I would like to see that matching process increased. And that is one way that we can address the shortages of family physicians, and hopefully also helping out with the emergency room situation that we have.
Absolutely. Sean, thank you for that. And Dr. Nataros, if we were to make it easier for people to come in from abroad or to study abroad and come in to work back in Canada and BC, would that be enough to sort of fill those coffers enough that we're not seeing this lack of family doctors, a lack of ER care?
I think it's part of the solution for sure. And, I've got a number of friends and colleagues who were internationally trained medical graduates. I think one of the things we need to do is make sure that there's commitment to the communities that these physicians are going back to practice in.
Okay.
And, up until I moved to Port Hardy 3 years ago, we've had a revolving door of international medical graduates that complete their return of service in 2 years because they're told they have to, and then they move. And, where again, our patients will lose the continuity of care that's so critical to good health care. So we need to fine tune our system. But big picture, answering your caller's question, yes, we need to do more to get international medical graduates back to Canada.
Absolutely. A call from Brenda in Victoria. Hi, Brenda. What would you like to speak about today?
Oh, hello. First and foremost, I would really like to thank Dr. Nataros for coming to Port Hardy in the first place. If it wasn't for him, we would have no health care in Port Hardy. As he has said, our emergency rooms closed, not ours. I don't live there. I live in Victoria.
Okay.
My mom lives in Port Hardy, and he's my mom's doctor.
Okay.
And she's 85. She has to go down island to get care because the hospitals in Port Hardy closed. She has to go, she gets transferred down there. If she was to be taken to emergency, like 4:30, they will automatically transfer her down to Campbell River because they close at 5 o'clock. So Dr. Nataros has spent so much of his own money and his own time to give proper health care at the North Island, and we need more doctors like him that will fight
Island Health and tell them that they are the ones that are wrong, that we need proper care on the North Island, not just for Port Hardy, for Port McNeil, Port Alice, Holbert, Wasp, the whole North Island. Instead of someone telling someone like my mom that is 85 that she's going to have to move down island for home care, or she's going to have to move down island if she wants to be moved into a senior's home care. So she refuses to do that, and she lives at home on her own because she does not want to leave the North Island. That's where she wants to end her life.
That's her home, and we hear that so much. And Brenda, thank you for that. And obviously, Dr. Nataros, you're very much appreciated. But, you know, perhaps it shouldn't be up to just one doctor to invest so much of their own time and their own funds to make this a possibility for an area that obviously needs such care. I just want to get in a couple more calls before we have to move on. So I'll head to Jay in Cranbrook. Hi, Jay. How are you feeling about the healthcare system?
Hey, thanks. Well, thanks for taking the call, and for everyone that works in this space. I know it's been challenging even before COVID, let alone now. And in particular, to touch on something that's specific to Cranbrook, but I'm sure it happens in many other regions, is the hospital here being a regional hospital and the influx of Albertans and foreigners, both to tour here and visit and play, as well as people getting out of the city and wanting to raise families, has just put a wild burden on this hospital. And so I do have firsthand experience with my kid and going to the Emerge. But broader is that basically, in some ways, the hospital really relied on Alberta to be able to medevac people there, and certainly be able to medevac people to the Lower Mainland or other hospitals as need be. But we've been really left hung out to dry and twisting in the wind. It's like cutting off our arms at times when Alberta, for a time, completely rejected all flights, and I think still rejects a lot of care that we basically banked on. And so, like, in the case of my own kid, the Emerge was completely full of kids with respiratory issues. Our ICU is meant for adults, not kids, and there was like at least half a dozen that needed medical transport, including my own kid.
Right.
And we were just left hung out to dry, and they ended up putting a whole bunch of those kids into the adult ICU. Like, when we have like such a huge amount of resources that provide upwards of 12% of provincial revenue, and we're left out to dry, like, what is going on?
No, I can understand how frustrating that would be, and scary as well as a parent, and scary for your own child. So thank you for sharing that. And perhaps, yes, Dr. Nataros, sort of interprovincial, it should be a bit easier for people to access that level of care.
Totally. And, you know, I worked in Dauphin, Manitoba, and we had a STARS ambulance service, which serves, you know, parts of our southeast corner, but mostly Alberta and Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and they worked between the borders. So there's models of care that we can do better. And again, we just have to learn from one another. This is more reason we need our federal politicians to start to take responsibility of the healthcare space.
We've got one final call that's come in, and I appreciate your patience staying with us, Dr. Nataros. Obviously, this has touched an incredible nerve. Lynn in Victoria. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Amy Bell. I would suggest that in order to reduce emergency visits and to help in costs for health care, that disability and welfare payments should be living wages, so that those people who live below the poverty line cannot afford to keep themselves healthy by buying good food, veggies and fruit. You know, the suggestion by Julie was great, but these people live below the poverty line and they can't stay healthy. They have to buy the cheapest.
Right.
So that's my suggestion.
And I appreciate that, Lynn. Thank you so much. And a good spot to end, Dr. Nataros, and that's just that reminder that it is all so connected. And when we focus on healthcare, we are also talking about wages. We're talking about housing. It is all just so intertwined.
Totally. And I really appreciate you, Amy, and your listeners putting healthcare first and foremost today.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time with us. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Dr. Alex Nataros is a physician and the medical director of the North Island Community Health Centre in Port Hardy. It is 12:45, and this is BC Today. And lots more happening on the top stories on your afternoon shows in your region. In Metro Vancouver, On the Coast is on top of all the latest on the federal election campaign. Also, some exciting guests to talk sports, records, and Junos. Here's Gloria Makarenko.
Amy, hi there. It's Gloria Makarenko here, and I'd love it if you could join us for On the Coast this afternoon. Of course, we are following all the twists and turns of the federal election campaign, so we've got you covered on that front. And also, it's not every day that someone from Richmond sets a world record. Evan Dunphy has set a new standard in the men's 35-kilometer event at the World Athletics Race Walking Tour Gold meeting in Slovakia. So he's back home, and the Olympic bronze medalist is going to be our guest to talk about just what it takes to reach these new heights, literally one step at a time. And we have been running a contest to win a pair of tickets to see the Junos on Sunday, so we will reveal our short list of Canadian lyrics to meet the moment that we're living right now. And an award-winning songwriter is going to join us to announce the winner. So join us for On the Coast between 3 and 6 this afternoon.
Thank you so much, Gloria. And of course, you can hear On the Coast on CBC Radio 1 here in Metro Vancouver and anywhere on the CBC News app. And spring has sprung, and one of the greatest sounds of the season is the chorus of songbirds that you can hear. Whether it's a finch, a robin, a thrush, or a sparrow, it is a delightful soundtrack for spring. We had a nice selection there, but what chirpiest tweet sounds the sweetest, and which songbird soars above the rest? Let us know your favorite songbird. Call us at 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, pound 690 on your cell, or email bctoday@cbc.ca. We are joined by Wildlife Rescue Association's Programs Director, Jackie McQuillan, to talk about the organization's latest contest that's kind of gone to the birds. Jackie, hello.
Hello, nice to speak with you today.
As well, you. Sorry, we had so many calls for our last segment, so you were very patient and waiting for us. Last year, as many people know, you held the Best Bird in BC competition, and the winner was Anna's hummingbird. I approve wholeheartedly. But this year it is a little different, so tell us about it.
Yeah, we've shaken up things a little bit this year, and so we're doing a songbird sing-off for this year's competition. And so we put together a list of 32 birds off the top to go head to head for people to pick their favorites. And of course, people can choose not only because of their song, but because of whatever they love about those songbirds. So we are now in the second round of the competition. So we're down to 16 birds.
Yes, and any surprises from the first elimination round?
Well, my heart was a little bit impacted by the loss of the American dipper, which is our only aquatic songbird. So just an incredible little bird that actually goes under the water to forage and is really unique. So I was a little bit sad to see that one eliminated in the first round, but there's still some great birds to vote for.
There's incredible birds all across the province. Why the focus though on songbirds specifically this year?
Yeah, so spring is such a great time to highlight songbirds because many of our songbirds are migratory. So they're coming back to British Columbia right now and over the next few weeks. And when they return, they're often coming back to breed. And so song just, it fills the air, it fills the trees, it fills our yards and our cities and our parks. And so it's a great way to kind of welcome them back and get people interested in learning about just the huge diversity of songbirds that we have across the province.
Well, and I think obviously because I had our interview today on my mind, but when I was out early this morning with my dog Bruce, I was really, sort of tuned in, and I couldn't believe just how many different birds I heard, but I really had no idea what I'm hearing. I think I can identify, a chickadee and a robin, but that's it. What are some of the sort of, I don't want to play favorites, but standouts that maybe people don't realize they're hearing, some of the contenders this year?
Yeah, for sure. So the purple finch is got a very beautiful song. It's one of those birds that actually will also incorporate the sounds of other birds into their vocalizations, which is quite unique. We have quite an array. So the Canada Jay is a little bit squawky, and so my voice is a little bit hoarse today. So I'm kind of commiserating with them. I would say that some of even the ones that are familiar that you've spoken about, like the robin, that's such a sign of spring.
It is.
As people recognize it, like it's also very comforting, right? To hear when they kind of return and really start returning to birdsong. So I think that that's really cool. The personal favorite of mine that remains on the list is definitely the red-breasted nuthatch. So if you've never seen one, they're just a beautiful little bird that has a red breast, as their name implies, and they've got a black mask and a black cap and then a beautiful white belly. And they're really interesting because they can zip around trees in kind of any direction looking for insects. And so you can see them climbing up and climbing down, and it's quite unique to watch.
Awesome. We have a call from Cody in Trail. Hi, Cody. Do you have a favorite songbird you want to shout out today?
Yeah. First off, I'd like to say good afternoon, Amy. It's nice to see you in the afternoons rather than the mornings. You don't have to get up so early.
It's true.
Jackie,
I get to sleep in.
I feel really sorry that you have a sore throat, but I'm so glad you're on with Amy. And as Jackie was just saying, I love the Canada Jay. I don't know if I've heard of purple finch. I don't think they're quite. I'm not sure if they're ever over this way in Trail. But I would probably go with the red-breasted. I would probably also go, if I had to vote, red-breasted nuthatch.
There you go. Another fave of Jackie's. Cody, thanks so much for calling in. And, that sort of was one question I wanted to ask you, Jackie, is, are there certain birds that are very specific to small areas of the province that, maybe people would not be able to hear on a regular basis?
Yeah, certainly some of them are restricted to certain habitats, and also some of them are really transitional. So they come back for a short period of time to breed, and then they may move on. I feel like we're in a really great place with technology to support people who are learning to bird, because there are some apps that you can use to help you see the birds that are in your area at any given time, and also apps that you can use to help identify the bird song that you're hearing in your yard. So you can actually set it to record, and it will tell you as it hears a different bird, and you can learn how to recognize new bird song in that way.
Oh, I love that. And I know this competition obviously is very fun. We're not trying to pit one bird against the other too much, but are there some more serious issues that, birds and songbirds face in our province that, you want people to keep in mind while they're listening to their songs?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the big things that our organization does is educate the public on how to coexist with urban wildlife. And we know that birds are really suffering from the effects of people, whether that's buildings with windows where birds are, colliding with the windows because they can't see them. Insecticides are a huge one. So a lot of the insectivore birds are really being impacted by the reduction in available insects to eat. So things like our swallows, they're really declining. And this is also a really great opportunity for people to learn about what they can do kind of on the ground in their neighborhood, how they can talk to their government representatives about what is important to them in terms of their local environment and how to protect the birds.
Okay, good things to keep in mind, of course. We've got time for one more call from Alexis in Slocan Valley. Do you have a favorite songbird?
Well, obviously all the tiny birds are amazing.
I know, you just want to put them in your pocket.
The absolute most amazing is the house wren. What is it, 27 notes? And when it sings, its little tail, very hard to see. They're a very tiny bird, and they go from 180 to 180. They spin back and forth, and their little tail goes in a circle. They're amazing.
Oh, they are, and that is one of the ones that I know. So thanks for calling in, Alexis. And I jokingly said that, but some of these small birds, they are so adorable and so tiny, and then you hear this incredibly epic noise come out of them, and it can be so surprising, and that's just one of the things I love about them. Jackie, before I let you go, how can people vote in this year's hot competition?
Yeah, please head to our website, which is wildliferescue.ca, or check out any of our social media outlets for a link to vote. When you land on our website, if you just scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the graphic for the best bird of BC.
There we go.
Just click on that, and you will be taken through the different options so that you can vote in each of the categories.
And we're just showing the graphic from the website with the brackets, and I see now the first round unceremoniously scratched out in orange, and so that's it, we're done with them. But I look forward to listening to all of the birds, and of course seeing who the winner is once it's crowned. Jackie, thank you so much for speaking with us. Hope you can rest your voice for a little bit now.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
That is Jackie McQuillan, Programs Director with Wildlife Rescue Association. And that is our show for today.